Hello again, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm glad that everyone could join us today. I am Lauren Skinner-Johnson, and I will be moderating today's webinar. And our speaker today is my colleague, Ray Grove, who is a product manager at Convey. Today's webinar is going to focus on transmitting. So a lot of you have made it through January and now most of February, and many of you have sent your 1099 forms to your recipients. But now you have to worry about filing. And as with most tax information reporting activities, the filing process can be quite complicated and sometimes risky. So Ray is going to walk you through some form deadlines, some file format requirements, as well as some best practices overall for filing. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items. Today's attendees are going to be on mute for the entire half hour, but we do want to encourage that you ask any questions if you have them. We just ask that you type them into the chat window or to the Q&A window in the panel on the right-hand side of your screen. And then at the end of the webinar, Ray and I will review the questions and address them as needed. And then also, I want to remind you that now is the time to take advantage of our double early bird pricing for Convey's annual Tax and Regulatory Conference. The 2013 C2 Summit is going to be at the Omni Champions Gate Resort in Orlando, Florida, and it will start on Sunday, October 20th, and go through Wednesday, October 22nd. It's a live tax information reporting seminar, and that Sunday is a half-day training of Convey solutions, and then Monday and Tuesday are 2 full days of compliance and regulatory sessions. And with that, I'd like to introduce Ray Grove, who is a product manager at Convey.
Thank you, Lauren, and welcome everyone. So today we're going to be covering federal transmittals. But before we start jumping into that right away, let's just cover a brief agenda. And one item that's definitely going to be asked, I know, is going to be, are these slides going to become available? At the end of the webinar, we'll make these slides available to you, the attendees, and we'll send you an email with the information on how you can get those slides. So if you're worried about the content and being able to get copies of this content, it will be available. So today's agenda, first we're going to do a state of the state for 1099s. It's just a good refresher for us to understand why many of you are on the phone, why this is an important topic, and why it's something your organization is probably spending a bit more time talking about. Then we're going to talk about requirements for filing. So what are the things you should know, as well as what are some of the penalties, and the 8809, and what is it, how it can help, and some key takeaways. So with that, we'll begin. So as many of you probably are aware, if you're responsible for 1099s, you're probably on this call. If you're not responsible for 1099s, I'm not sure why you're on this call. But those of you that are responsible, you've probably seen that you get more forms, more penalties, and you spend more money, and ultimately there's more problems that organizations like yourself are facing. As many of you know, penalties have increased. We're seeing new legislation like 3921, 3922, which ended up getting repealed. That was the corporate reporting. We saw 6041, 6050W. We have FATCA right around the corner. The world of third-party information reporting is becoming a complex one. It's becoming much more highly regulated, and there's getting a lot more focus. And if you're saying, well, why this thing nobody really seemed to care about 10, 15 years ago? Why is all the focus on it right now? Well, the feds and states are broke. So, for those of you that are maybe not familiar, there's a little thing that we call the tax gap. The first time the tax gap was measured in 2001, it was measured to be about $350 billion annually of uncollected revenues that the IRS is supposed to receive that they don't receive. That was most recently measured in 2006, where it was about $450 billion annually that goes uncollected. Now, these are taxes that are owed to the IRS that they don't end up receiving. And of that, the IRS estimates that over 70% is due to miss or underreporting of income. So you ask yourself, 1099s, what are they? Well, in a lot of respects, they're nothing more than a tattletale system for our economy. It's a means for the IRS to know what you paid the people that you're doing business with in case those individuals decide on their own not to report that income that they made with you. So with this issue, you're seeing the feds and states having their budgetary issues and taxes being more or less unpopular as always. So they're looking at ways to increase revenue. And really information reporting is an obvious choice for them to close that gap. That's also why you're seeing increased penalties and less abatement and states following the same methodology and issues. Because ultimately, if they can close the information reporting gap, it makes it a lot easier for them. And the way that they're going to be able to do that is by becoming firmer on penalties and increasing those penalties. And why does this matter? Well, it matters because it costs you and your organization money. In fact, 2011 IPP Tax and Regulatory Study identified that for organizations in the financial and accounting space, that it is a top or middle priority for roughly 80%. So it's something that not only is a pain point and something that's getting more focus, but it is for a lot of people. So a lot of you are probably feeling the stress. There's more regulatory changes every single year. State reporting gets to be pretty complicated. The TIN management and fee notice process is a very difficult one to navigate your way through. And a lot of organizations are just struggling because historically they haven't had the tools in place to be able to get these things done. If you're feeling stressed, you're not alone. That same study saw that 82% of those that responded saw an increase in their 1099 reporting workload and foresaw an increase moving forward. So that covers the state of the state have you of 1099 reporting. Really the purpose there is to, once again, reiterate the importance of this process and that this is not something that can just simply be ignored. So what we're going to talk about is filing your IRS 1220. So where should you be today? Well, today, as Lauren stated earlier, you should have printed and mailed it to your recipients. So that deadline is passed, January 31st, for you to have printed and mailed your forms to recipients. You should have updated your systems with the most, up-to-date, compliant. A lot of you are probably using a software product, so making sure that the technology you're using is compliant. If you're not using a service for the 1220, doing a 1220 test file. Now the 1220 is the utilizing the IRS Fire system. The test file and test process, that window has ended as of last week. And right now you should be looking at managing revisions and taking steps to reduce B notices and penalties. And we'll cover more of that reducing B notice and penalties a little bit later. Now the managing of revisions, this is it's important to note why there is a time difference between when you print and mail and when you file. The IRS assumes that you're going to need to make corrections between you and the recipient on the information that you sent them and the information that you're ultimately going to be sending the IRS. This is why the IRS expects you to send them as accurate of information as possible. So when you are going to send that publication 1220 or that 1220 file, first thing you want to do is review the 1220 publication. I have here the link as well as the current version dated August 13th, 2012. If you're familiar with this process last year, the changes for 2012 are minimal at best. And once again, the test transmittal period has ended. So, do you need to file electronically? Well, if you have over 250 forms, the IRS says you must file electronically. Now, for a lot of people, they enter into the year not sure whether or not they are going to file electronically. So they end up at this point in time where it's a process that they're not ready for. They didn't realize they were going to have over 250 forms, and they're thinking, well, what can I do? You don't want to, or there's undue hardship. There actually is a form for this to get a waiver. That waiver is Form 8508. If you type in IRS Form 8508 into Google, the form will come up, and you can actually file for a waiver. Now, if you decide to file with paper and you are over 250 forms, you will be assessed a penalty of $100 per form over 250. If you file the request for waiver and you do not receive it, you need to be sure that you, once again, attach that requested waiver to the IRS if you still are not going to end up filing electronically with the IRS to, if nothing else, try to avoid and or abate the penalty that you will be assessed. So when do you need to file? So here we have the dates for filing on paper and filing electronically. Note that filing on paper, the dates are earlier. So the dates for filing on paper are what they show here. However, you'll notice that at the very bottom it says if the date falls on a Saturday or Sunday or legal holiday, the file needs to be by the next business day. So March 31st falls on a weekend, and April 1st is actually when the electronic submission for the 1220 is due to the IRS. So if you are filing electronically, you do get an extra day. Please note, if you're doing a 1042S, that date is March 15th, and that is the same for both paper and the electronic file. And for the electronic file, I refer to it as a 1220. Many people refer to it as a FIRE, the IRS FIRE system file. Same thing, just in case you're confused on that. So some of you might be thinking, well, wait a second, I need more time. I'm not going to be able to get that done in time. There's no way I'm going to be able to do the things I need to do to get that information to the IRS as accurately as possible. And when we talk about some of the things you should be doing, this issue of I need more time might become more prevalent. Well, if you need more time, they have a form for that as well. So Form 8809, call this resetting the clock. This is an application for extension of the time to file information returns. Once again, I have a link at the bottom of the slide here. You can also simply do a search for Form 8809. All the information is available there. The Form 8809 can be filed either on paper or filed via the FIRE system. The dates for filing your Form 8809 are the same as the dates for filing the same 1099s. I recommend that you file the Form 8809 as soon as possible if you expect that you're not going to be able to get it done on time, because filing your Form 8809 is not necessarily mean that the IRS has approved it. There is more information on this and cautions that the IRS tells you actually on Form 8809 where they give you directions on what to do if you're filing it and you're close to the date and you have not gotten a response from the IRS. Now, once again, the deadlines are the same as the corresponding forms. You can file one 8809 and select all the forms that you're responsible for filing. You do not need to do an 8809 for each individual type of third-party information reporting form. You can do one for your W-2s, 1099s, and 1042s if necessary. Now, the 8809 provides you a 30-day extension. If you're saying, well, 30 days isn't enough, I need more time, good news is you can actually file it twice for a total of 60 days. But you have to file it first the first time before filing it the second time. So why bother? Why bother with more time? Maybe you don't feel you need more time. You hopefully will change your mind on that one a little bit here. So as we discussed, there's a lot of penalties associated with, and there's a lot more scrutiny on this process. That being said, it's now for us to talk about penalties. This is why you should bother. Because for a lot of you, TIN compliance is an issue or something that you struggle with. So if you transmit 1099s that have missing incorrect TINs, you will get a B notice. you do not want to be noticed, because if you were on yesterday's webinar where we talked about B-Notice best practices, you probably noted that the B-Notice process is not something that is fun, and there are better ways to spend your summer. So taking the extra time now to correct this data is actually incredibly valuable. The important thing is the 8809 actually provides you this time, because remember, just because you sent a recipient a 1099 that has a name and TIN that they gave you that is incorrect, doesn't mean you want to send the same information to the IRS. You want to send the information to the IRS that is as correct as it possibly can be, especially as it relates to name TIN. And being proactive on this process is ultimately best. And if this is right now where you're looking at trying to put together the TIN compliance practices, not the most ideal situation, but there is still time to do things. So what we're going to talk about is a proactive versus reactive, because for a lot of people, the way they deal with TIN compliance is really through a B-Notice management process. And what we're going to talk about is getting in front of the B-Notice process and using this gap between now and submission of your 1220 to do so. So we're going to discuss identity management. So the unique thing about identity management is, for all of us, depending on the business that we have and depending on the clients that we serve, we're all managing different identities. For those of us that are banks or investment firms, you're dealing with customers, the relationships you have with these people are incredibly valuable. There's a certain aspect of client service that definitely needs to be considered more so than maybe if you're dealing with vendors. If you're an AP department and this is a supplier or a contractor, not saying that the relationship is unimportant. However, it's slightly different than a customer. Providers, health insurance, merchants, this is going to dictate, in a lot of cases, the frequency of contact, the frequency of touch points that you have with these individuals, which ultimately is going to make this process of collecting this information, if identified to be incorrect, that much more difficult. So most of us follow a very basic process. You file your 1099s, you receive a B-Notice, you send your W-9s, you receive your 972CG, you write your abatement, and you do this process over and over and over again. The abatement process is not as easy as it used to be, from the standpoint that you can't abate the same B-Notice over and over and over again. You have to start entering into withholding. There's a lot of additional steps and processes that go into it. So what we really want to do is get out of that and become more proactive than reactive. And for many of you, you're thinking, that sounds really hard. Can I just skip it? Well, sadly, no. I guess you really could say that you could, but you have to keep in mind that you'll be responsible for the penalties, the fines, and willful neglect is fines plus up to a year in jail. And now that you know, it's willful neglect. There's also mandatory backup withholding, which from a standpoint of vendor relationships, customer relationships, putting somebody in a backup withholding status is not really a good way to nurture a relationship. So what kind of tools are there to help? Well, for one, the IRS actually offers some e-services to help with this. They offer both an interactive TIN matching and a bulk TIN matching. And to sign up for this service, you can reference publication 2108A. Now, here's the beautiful part about the process. This is actually a free tool and service that the IRS offers. So if you look up publication 2108A, all the information for signing up is available there, and you and your organization can sign up and begin using it. So you can submit the bulk TIN service, for instance, is taking your like vendor master or your 1099 miscellaneous payees and sending those to the IRS in their approved format and having that information checked against their database that they'll be using. They receive the 1099s and telling you yes or no that the information you have is indeed correct or incorrect. That's an incredibly valuable tool from the standpoint of at least understanding where you are today. Whereas gives you instant results of being able to enter in a payee PIN and name and getting results back from the IRS instantly on that individual payee. Now, although these are free services, signing up does take time. It requires a Social Security number, adjusted gross income of an officer of the company to do so. So a lot of organizations do find that it is sometimes difficult to get through the approval process to sign up and enter into the contractual agreement with the IRS that the 2108A publication requires. That being said, there are services, like what is offered here at Convey, that allow you to use these services without having to go through any of that, as we have a relationship with the IRS ourselves that you benefit from to be able to use those services. Now, after you've identified that the information is incorrect, whether it be a results from a bulk TIN file, or whether it be a real-time TIN lookup, there are different ways you can reach out and touch someone, for lack of a better phrase. Obviously, if they're there, you can ask them again for the correct information, use a real-time TIN tool and ensure that they give it to you correctly. But prior to being in the B notice process, there's a lot of options available to you. You can do a W-9, you can mail a W-9 or substitute W-9, you can send an email, letter self-mailer, telephone, customer service, portal on website. It's important to note that if the IRS is telling you through the B notice process that this information is correct, you can take all these wonderful options available to you through these solicitation packets and throw them out the window, because you are now in the B notice process, and that must be followed. Once again, we did a webinar yesterday on the B notice process if you want to understand more about what that process looks like. So, you're able to get the information from the standpoint of you know what's wrong, you know what's good, and you're sending out your solicitations. Problem solved, you don't have to worry about it. Well, based on a 40% response rate, just to set expectations, it can take some time to fix. Now, for a lot of you, you're probably not sitting with 13,000 TINs that need to be remediated. But if you were, it'd take you roughly 18 months to remediate those TINs. So if you're just getting started on this process and you have a mountain in front of you, it's going to take time. But by taking the steps of identifying the information, doing the solicitations, you're actually meeting your requirement from the IRS from a standpoint of adjudicating that penalty for a B notice. So these are important steps to take regardless, even if you have not taken anything or are not going to be able to get completely clear of getting this information. So, a proactive process. First and foremost, identify the incorrect information. Key point there, there's no rules on how to solicit or collect the data, and a multi-pronged approach from a standpoint of soliciting, collecting responses, updating the data, repeating that is important. Another point, just as a warning for a lot of organizations, they do cover this in publication 2108A, but depending on how you are using the system, you want to be sure that you use it correctly, because they have strict phishing rules, and a violation leads to a 96-hour lockout. You don't want to be locked out and put in a situation like that with the TIN services with the IRS. So hopefully that explains why maybe you want to take that extra time from the standpoint of submitting your actual 1220 file for electronic submission to the IRS. If you do so, you have time to clean and remediate some of those TINs. It also provides you more time if you have payees that are a little bit slower about getting back to you and saying, hey, the box 3 on my 10M miscellaneous is incorrect. You tell me I did 1,500, I actually did 15,000. Generally not the type of mistake a payee will call you for, but as much time as you have as possible to get that information to the IRS is generally best practice. So if you're thinking, you know what, it's time for a change in the way that you're doing things, good news for you is Convey, we're actually offering a special promotion. With a purchase of 2013 tax year Taxport AP, it's our newest staff solution, you actually will get free access to the TIN services. The application provides both bulk and real-time TIN services as part of the service, and a free 2012 transmittals to purchase. We are limiting this to the first 50 respondents, and if you want more details on that promotion, you can call the number supplied here or email sales@convey.com. Also, if you're looking at a good way to stay up to date on some of the regulatory changes, a lot of the weeds in the details perspective is definitely provided in our 1099 news site. When there's updates to things like the Pub 1220, we'll reference that there. We also have a Twitter account and a LinkedIn site. The LinkedIn site is a great resource for law professionals like yourself to be able to share ideas, best practices, and any challenges that you might be having. So with that, I will turn it back over to Lauren.
Great, thanks, Ray. We did have a few questions roll in, so I'm going to jump right into those. The first few are around the 1220 test file. A couple of people are wondering if you have to do a test file every year, and if not, if they didn't do it, is it a big issue?
No, you do not need to do a 1220 file test file each year. We recommend doing it just from a standpoint of, sometimes they make a change, or a lot of times there will be a system change on the side of your business that can change the structure of the files. So sending a test file a lot of times catches that. However, you're not required to send a test file to the IRS.
Onto the 8809, are you charged a penalty if you file late with an 8809?
Yeah, you'd be assigned the same penalties you would if you filed a 1099 miscellaneous late. The details on penalties and information for the 8809, one of the things I recommend to people a lot of times is, with things like 8809, look at the form and actually read through the instructions on it. There is a wealth of information on those forms from a standpoint of the rules, and the IRS has actually gotten quite a bit better about providing information that is digestible to really anybody, and providing a lot of tips and tricks as well.
Do you need a valid reason to file a Form 8809?
No, actually, really, it doesn't really ask you for a valid reason. The 8809, from a standpoint of completing the form, is the filer name, the address, the city, a contact name and phone number, the tax ID number for your organization, and then you simply check the box of the forms that you wish to apply.
Another question on the 1220, if they missed the window for the test, do they have any option to request an extension for that test window for the 1220?
No, when the 1220 test window is closed, the 1220 test window is closed.
Okay. And then there was a question on 1042S. Will the IRS assess a penalty if you file all foreign customers as 1042S rather than just the designated countries?
That is a good question that I have to throw back to our compliance team.
So we'll follow up with you on that question. And let me see. If we haven't gotten to your question, we'll definitely follow up with you since we're running short on time here. I'm just reviewing the questions. And I think that's all for today. Again, I've taken note of all of your questions that we've received, and we'll follow up with you and get you an answer as soon as we can. Ray did mention at the beginning of today's webinar that this event has been recorded, and we will be sending you a link to the recorded webinar as well as a PDF version of the slides from today's webinar. You'll probably get that in your email on Friday sometime from me. Again, you can still send in any questions you have. Like I said before, we'll record them and make sure that someone follows up with you to get you that answer. So thank you again for joining us today. As Ray mentioned, you can check out our blog, our LinkedIn page, or follow us on Twitter. Feel free to also visit our website, convey.com, if you have any other questions. So thank you again for joining us, and have a great afternoon.